Reserve Bank Governor Phillip Lowe under pressure with the Greens calling on the government to act and not allow any more rate hikes. Inghams Group warns of a big jump in chicken prices, and a Swedish study says you don't have to be the smartest to earn the most. Woohoo! It's Monday, the 20th of February, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. I'm on a high. The whole idea that you don't have to be the smartest to be richest, it's just given me a little spring in my step this morning.
It's very encouraging for a lot of us, isn't it, Sean?
Sure is.
Now, immediately after the show, you've got an interview with Nick Healy from Wilson Asset Management. He's a portfolio manager for WAM Global.
Yes, Nick's great particularly on Wall Street stocks, but also European stocks. And we talk about different companies that are doing well, how to think about overseas companies. And he provides us with a couple of his favourites. And even within a sectors, he talks about why he likes one company, like an elevator company, but doesn't like the other one. So it's just a fascinating chat. If you're an investor and you're thinking about overseas stocks, definitely one not to miss.
Yeah, it's definitely worth sticking around for that one. But the main story this morning, Sean, this is interesting. The pressure on Reserve Bank Governor Phillip Lowe is building, with Greens leader Adam Bandt calling on the Labor government to take action and actually override the central bank if it lifts rates again.
Yes, now I don't think they can do that because when Peter Costello was Treasurer, he enshrined an independent central bank, which is something that Phillip Lowe, the Reserve Bank Governor, talked about last week. But Greens leader Adam Bandt, who is extremely powerful nowadays because the Greens, of course, with a couple of crossbenchers, hold the balance of power in the Senate, yesterday said the government should do more than jawboning and step in to override the bank if it lifts rates again. Mr. Bandt also urged the government to freeze rents, include dental on Medicare, and revisit the Stage 3 tax cuts to drive down cost of living pressures. But it really is the comments about the Reserve Bank and Phil Lowe, particularly since Phil Lowe really is under pressure at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Sean, on that, the calls by Adam Bandt to override the Reserve Bank. When you say that Peter Costello enshrines the model of the independent central bank, what was it before? Was there a kind of political interference prior to that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't really know, but there wasn't, in my experience, any political interference. But what Costello did was basically codify that there couldn't be political interference and the Reserve Bank is an independent organisation. I'm sure decades ago there was sort of the mates getting together, chatting about what should be done. I don't doubt that. Not in more recent times, and certainly it can't be done now.
It makes that call rather unusual then, doesn't it? But you're right, Phillip Lowe is really under a lot of pressure, but he's nothing if not stoic, repeating his message on Friday about the economic crisis that waits for us if we don't step on inflation.
Yes, he's sure. I mean, that's obviously what he's mostly worried about. He said there'd be greater pain if inflation is allowed to get out of control. So high inflation, if it becomes entrenched, he said, there'll be a steep downturn in the economy. You're looking at things like unemployment at near 9%. You'd need that, throw the economy into recession to get inflation back under control. So what he's trying to do now is keep rates high, and central banks around the world are trying to keep rates high so we don't get to that situation. He acknowledged that the full effect of higher rates is yet to be felt for a lot of people, given that many borrowers are still on low fixed rate loans. He also confirmed that the government's fiscal settings are appropriately neutral and not adding to the inflation problem. That's the good news. Also that the government's oil and gas price caps should have a material impact on inflation in the next financial year. Let's hope so.
So what do you reckon, Sean? Will he get another term in September when his time's up, or an extension?
Yeah, the past couple have received extensions, but I don't think so. I think the political pressure is probably too much. It's a bit of a shame because apart from that 2024 promise, Phil Lowe's done a really good job. Okay, the 2024 promise was a big mistake. He said that rates wouldn't rise before 2024, and yep, we've had 3 percentage points or more of rises in about 10 months. So that was a big stuff up. But otherwise, he's managed the economy during COVID. He's managed the economy during all these trade challenges. He's worked under both the coalition and Labor governments. I'm not sure who can do a better job. I mean, it's unlikely that they would pick someone from within the bank, and they may find someone from outside, but running the Reserve Bank isn't for the faint-hearted. It isn't an easy job.
Who knew that the Reserve Bank could provide so much theatre, Sean?
Oh, no, it's great, isn't it?
It's extraordinary.
When I worked there, I got to tell you, most of the theatre was the morning tea time. But it seems to have changed. That was 30 years ago, admittedly. The Reserve Bank is very different now.
Can you give us an insight into what it's like inside the Reserve Bank in the tea room? Are there biscuits?
There are, but it used to be, it's a while ago, and I'm feeling bad that I even brought this up, but there used to be date scone Wednesday. So every Wednesday, you used to get date scones. And so, of course, the tea room it was the floor of the building, on a Wednesday was packed. Everyone wanted date scones. Now, this is 30 years ago. I've got to just add.
Yeah. And one would hope that they've cut down on that kind of extraordinary largesse.
Oh, certainly not date scones. I mean, pumpkin maybe, but you just can't keep going with the date scones.
Have you seen the price of dates lately, Sean? Now, let's move on. Local markets. I'm going to put you in an uncomfortable position about disclosing too much about the Reserve Bank shortly. But how did local markets go on Friday?
Well, the S&P ASX 200 finished down almost 1% to 7,347 points. That's about what the market finished for the week. Actually, it was down 1.2%. Pretty good day on Friday for insurer QBE. Shares climbed 7% after it announced a jump in profit and premiums. Diversified miner South32 announced a bumper $2 billion pre-tax profit, but its share price ended more than 2% lower. A2 Milk also had a good day. Chinese state administrators said it will commence an audit for re-registration of A2 Milk's Chinese labelled baby formula. And shares in Baby Bunting, the infant goods retailer, fell 6% after it reported a big drop in half-year profit.
All right. What about international markets over the weekend?
Well, US shares fell back a bit on concerns about higher rates in the world's largest economy. Now, Wall Street is closed tonight for President's Day. Higher rates in the US, or at least expectations of higher rates, hit the Australian dollar, which starts the week under 69 US cents. Oil prices fell quite a bit over the weekend, down about 2.5%. Gold was flat. Coal prices keep falling.
Now, Sean, you've told us about international markets, but I know that's not enough for you, and I suspect this is some form of retribution for me putting you on the spot about scones, etc. You want to give me a lesson on sugar.
I do. Very exciting commodity at the moment. Did you know sugar futures are currently at 6-year highs?
Okay, you're assuming a lot here in terms of me understanding the significance of sugar futures. Just explain the concept of futures first.
Yes. So the idea is that I'm going to buy sugar in 3 months because I make lollies for a living or Coca-Cola for a living. So I purchase that sugar knowing that I need however many tons of sugar in 3 months' time. And so they talk about the futures price. So what I will pay in 3 months' time is this amount.
Okay. All right. On with the lesson.
Let's go with sugar prices. Let's just leave it at that. Good.
Yep.
So, but it's going through the roof. So all like baked goods, candy, soft drinks, all those things are going to get more expensive. Now, mostly it's because Brazil, which is the world's biggest exporter, hasn't had much of a crop for a while, though the current crop is apparently pretty good, but that's not going to be harvested until April. European production has been hit by drought. And there's also pesticide bans in some countries there, which is causing problems. Indian mills are diverting more cane to make ethanol. China's reopening could lift demand. So you put all that together and you've got a bit of a problem. Now, other big producers like Thailand and Pakistan won't really be able to make up the shortfall from the demand from China, given the shortfall in those other countries. For the record, Michael, Australia is about the 10th largest producer of sugar, but the bottom line is sugar prices, for the next few months at least, are going to be higher.
So you have to wait a bit longer than that if you're looking for a sweet deal.
Yes, Michael. Move on, please.
I loathe myself for that. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, former Liberal Minister Linda Reynolds says she paid Brittany Higgins compensation over her, quote, lying cow remark simply to, quote, make it go away, according to a report over the weekend in The Australian.
Reynolds says she was in such poor health at the time that she was in no state to defend herself against a claim of defamation. Senator Reynolds' frustration at being accused of failing to support Ms. Higgins following her rape allegations boiled over when Reynolds called Ms. Higgins a lying cow in an open plan area of her parliamentary office. It came after she learned Ms. Higgins was accusing her of failing to support her. When the remark was published 2 weeks later, Senator Reynolds was already on medical leave on the advice of her cardiologist, and it's now emerged that she paid compensation to Brittany Higgins over that particular comment. Now, Brittany Higgins tweeted yesterday that the compensation was paid to a rape crisis centre or something of that ilk. The bottom line is a very, very sad affair in Australian politics.
Yeah, it certainly is. Now, Sean, we found out last week that almost half of Westpac's $471 billion in home loans were written on assumptions that interest rates would end up lower than where they are now or will be in coming months.
Yes, CEO Peter King said the bank was using a serviceability buffer of between 2.5% and 3%, but rates are up 3.25%, obviously above that serviceability buffer. It means customers will be making higher repayments than the bank expected when they issued the loans. King said Westpac will work with customers to help them restructure loans to make them more affordable, something the other big lenders will need to do also. He said rates are likely to rise another 65 basis points or so, 2 or 3 times, but he believes the looming refinancing cliff, which everyone's talking about, will be more of a slope. What we heard last week from all the big banks and the Reserve Bank is that they know customers are hurting, they know it's going to get worse, and they also know they need to do something to help out.
Sean, Inghams Group, the country's largest chicken producer and supplier, says poultry prices are set to rise because feed, packaging and freight costs are rising.
Okay, here's a question without notice. So Australia, which is a relatively small player in the chicken world, slaughters how many chickens each year, mostly for consumption?
I'm going to go with a couple of 100 million, 250 million.
1.5 billion chickens each year.
No way.
Isn't that incredible? That's according to the Australian Chicken Meat Foundation. Yeah.
And you say that we are a chicken minnow.
We're certainly not in consumption because the average consumer intakes about 50 kilos of chicken each year. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. I mean, I suppose it's always, you compare it to kind of lamb and beef, and chicken is much more affordable.
Yeah, well, so lamb, we have about 10%. So it's about 5.5 kilos each year of lamb, of sheep meat actually, but primarily that is lamb. So it's about a tenth of that. And nowadays we actually eat more pig meat, bacon, pork, etc., than beef and veal. So when I grew up, chops, potatoes and 2 veg, that's what you had every night. Well, that would be a luxury now. It's all about chickens and pig meat. There you go.
Have you seen how expensive lamb chops are? Just like your humble lamb 4-quarter chops. It is extraordinary. You're paying cutlet prices for 4-quarter.
and the great thing about 4-quarter chops is that no one really likes them. You want the cutlets. You don't want the 4-quarters, but anyway.
It's extraordinary. Anyway, we have both digressed.
We have digressed. We're off. I don't know where we are. Anyway, Inghams announced a slump in earnings for the December half. Now, Inghams, of course, is the largest producer and supplier of chickens in Australia. It did experience a rise in revenue, but expenses are a real problem with the cost of sales up 11%. So therefore, prices are going up. So you can expect to pay more than that $11 or $12 a chook at your local supermarket sometime soon.
Unless you go just before closing, Sean, and you can pick up your $4 or your $5 chooks.
Yeah, but if you're doing it for the kids' sandwiches the next day and get there too late and it's not there, then you're in all sorts.
Oh, that is a gamble, isn't it? All right. Now, Sean, the ATO is on the hunt for 30,000 GST fraudsters, having already tracked down 20,000 as part of Operation Protego.
Yes, the Financial Review was reporting the operation was launched a year ago after the tax office uncovered a scam where offenders invented fake businesses and then submitted fictitious business activity statements to get fraudulent refunds. Apparently, participants were recruited on social media, including TikTok and Instagram. The fraud exploits ATO systems that provide faster GST refunds for new businesses, helping them to maintain cash flow. Almost 90 people have been arrested, 2 have been jailed, 20,000 have been told to repay the money, and $2.5 billion in dodgy refunds have been prevented.
Had a bit of a gripe about this on the afternoon edition on Friday, Sean, about the name of the operation, Protego, Protego. Very hard to kind of pronounce or figure out what it is. I just think the ATO could just make their names more simple.
Really? I mean, when you've got a name like the ATO, which is not very interesting.
Well, I propose I could just call it like Operation Fraud Stop or Operation Catch the Fraudsters. I mean, obviously, I'm not in charge of naming operations, but maybe I should be.
You know what Protego is, do you?
No, I don't. And maybe I should have looked that up.
Yeah, so it's a spell used to, I mean, this is me looking it up. It's a spell used to guard its caster from incoming spells. So it's like a wall around you.
Hang on, are you quoting Harry Potter here, Sean?
Actually, I think you're right.
Goodness me.
Yes, I think you're right.
You have taken Fear and Greed today to a new place, Sean. Thank you. So clearly the ATO is looking at Harry Potter for inspiration for its operation names. I take it all back, ATO. Well done. Now, Sean, this next one's a bit of a shock to me because I'm a big pie fan, but Mrs. Max Pies has gone broke and may have actually been trading insolvent at a time when it was trying to raise more money.
Yeah, so KPMG launched a capital raising for Mrs. Max Pies while the company was potentially trading insolvent. And despite 1 month earlier providing advice to directors about whether they'll be personally liable if the business collapsed, according to a story in the Financial Review. The owners of the popular pie brand, established in 1954, sold the majority of the business's assets to Pieface in October for about $24.2 million. The remaining shell company was placed into liquidation in November, leaving creditors out of pocket. The point here is if it was raising money while potentially insolvent, that is a big no-no for the company, but also for its advisors.
Yeah, sure is. Now, international news, Sean, in a sign that relations between Washington and Beijing remain very tense, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has warned China's top diplomat against providing aid to Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Yes, and he rebuked him over an alleged Chinese spy balloon that heightened tensions between the world's largest economies. Blinken told Chinese State Councillor Huang Yi on the weekend that the US had information China was considering giving Russia assistance, possibly including guns and weapons for the Ukraine war. The US has warned China since the start of the invasion a year ago not to do so, and Blinken was very clear in his comments on the weekend.
Now, this is a bit of sad news, Sean. Former President Jimmy Carter, who at 98 is the longest living president in American history, has decided to forego further medical treatment and will enter hospice care at his home in Georgia.
Yes, the former Democratic president has been in and out of hospital as his health has deteriorated. He's now decided to spend his remaining time at home and receive hospice care at home. Interesting guy, Jimmy Carter. He came basically from nowhere to be the Democratic nomination for president in 1976. That was a surprise to begin with. He then beat Gerald Ford in the general election campaign. Arguably, his greatest feat was negotiating the landmark Camp David Accords, making peace between Israel and Egypt. Now, that's an agreement that remains the foundation of Middle East relations. Whilst you can't say there's always peace in that region, certainly Jimmy Carter played a very, very big role in establishing the ground rules for them to live together.
Yeah, and he spent the last kind of few decades just working for charities, basically, and just dedicated the rest of his life to charitable endeavours. So he's a pretty remarkable man. Sean, final story. You mentioned this one and you celebrated this at the top of the show. A Swedish study that has found the biggest earners may not be the workers who are the brainiest. While general intelligence is correlated to higher wages, it is only up to a point.
And that point is about $57,000 US a year, which is about 82,000 Aussie. Beyond that, the study found that ability plateaus as wages continue to rise. Have you ever had a boss that you thought, geez, I get paid too much?
Well, considering my most recent boss is our colleague in Fear and Greed, Adam Lang, I'm going to choose not to answer that question.
Oh, that's even worse. Anyway.
No, sorry, Adam, if you're listening. I don't believe it to be the case. Can we please move on, Sean, please?
Yes. So earners in the top 1% score slightly worse in terms of intelligence than those in the income tier directly below them. In the words of the author, as reported by Bloomberg, we find no evidence that those with top jobs that pay extraordinary wages are more deserving than those who earn only half those wages. The study analysed the cognitive ability of 59,000 Swedish-born men at the age of 18 or 19 and their earnings during an 11-year window between about 35 and 45. And the upshot, the smartest aren't always the richest.
I have a theory on Swedish studies, Sean.
Yes.
There seems to be a Swedish study for everything. And in fact, in a recent wedding speech, I quoted a Swedish study about all these statistics about love and all of these things. The thing is, you attach the word Swedish study to something and people will believe it. I made the entire Swedish study up.
Did you really?
Yes.
Ah, well done.
And nobody fact-checked me. I mean, they generally wouldn't at a wedding, would they?
Probably not.
That is my theory on Swedish studies.
Well, this had 59,000 people in it. It's a pretty big study.
Did it really, Sean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It really did, Michael.
Okay, well, I will believe you. Now, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with Nick Healy from WAM Global.
Yep, all about investing overseas, Europe, Wall Street, what's better, what sectors to think about. Really interesting chat.
Yes, coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Also coming up is Fear and Greed the week ahead with our resident economist, Stephen Koukoulas. Everything you need to know about what's coming up in the world of economics. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Monday, the 20th of February, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.